Buenos dias, Medellin. That's the limit of my Spanish. That's all you're getting, I'm afraid. I could have chosen a better photo, I think. Sorry, I've skipped through it already. So, my name is Joe Bowman. I'm the co-founder of Quicksilver, the CEO of Ingenuity, and I wanted to come here today, and obviously thanks to the team for inviting me, to speak to you about liquid staking in the Cosmos, and specifically some of the features that liquid staking in the Cosmos brings to the fore that haven't necessarily needed to be considered previously. So, before we start, what is liquid staking? I mean, this is a term that has been bandied around in the Cosmos quite a lot recently. A year ago, it was something that wasn't really considered so much. Before, I think, Cosmoverse last year, it wasn't really spoken about much at all. And so liquid staking, for those of you that don't know, which I suspect would be very few of you, and thank you for the guys that have turned up this morning, and those that are nursing hangovers, double thanks for that. But liquid staking is essentially the ability for a user who holds staking tokens, who's invested in a proof-of-stake network, to be able to, in addition to staking, utilize the rest of their assets as well. So, essentially, what's at stake? So, there's a concept called the staker's dilemma that I mentioned in a previous talk back in Prague earlier this year. And the staker's dilemma is the one of a staking token holder has invested in the network, and they have two choices. And presently, they have to make this choice. They have to either choose to stake their staking token, earn their APR on their staking token rewards, and in doing so, they secure the network. So it's quite altruistic in its nature. But obviously they don't. They're not able to otherwise use those tokens. They're locked and they're staked. They can't do anything with it. The second side to this decision is that they can take their tokens off chain. They can take it to their favorite DEX or DeFi protocol, and they can earn their juicy DeFi yields on those tokens. And those APRs, especially as the DeFi economy proliferates, those APRs are quite exciting to users. They're quite high, and they're competing with each other, so they're only going to grow. Now, that obviously is a difficult decision for some people. Some people will choose to carry on and stake their tokens, and some people will choose to chase rewards. The second problem that we face is one of capital efficiency. So staking, by its very nature, is capital inefficient. You have your tokens locked up, and those tokens, by the nature of the protocol, those tokens can be slashed in the event of your validator misbehaving. The downside to this, of course, is that those staking tokens can be slashed, but only up to a maximum of 5% in most networks. So 95% of that capital is sat there, and it's not utilized. It's completely untouchable, it's locked up, and you can't use it. But liquid staking kind of solves this problem. Liquid staking solves the problem of the staker's dilemma, because you can both stake and you can take your tokenized assets off-chain and use them in DeFi, use them in DEXs, use them in liquidity pools, whatever. So you can earn your staking rewards and also your LP rewards, your DeFi rewards at the same time. And it also solves the problem of capital efficiency, because by virtue of the fact you can utilize these tokens in addition to staking, you can unlock that 95% of capital that's not at risk and not being utilized, and you can take those tokens off chain and use them. Now, the upshot to this and kind of side effect of liquid staking is that the current bonded ratio of Cosmos networks is around 60% on average. You've got about $5.3 billion of staked tokens across Cosmos networks currently. About $5 billion of that is locked and not usable. Now, that gets unlocked by liquid staking. But the flip side of this is that liquid staking allows for the bonded ratio, which is currently around 60%, to actually converge on 100%. So by virtue of liquid staking protocols existing and being used, we're actually able to better secure the networks going forwards, because we're able to essentially put more capital staked on networks rather than being held liquid, waiting for users to use them in DeFi. So what do we want to achieve at Quicksilver? Well, Quicksilver obviously wants to satisfy these problems that we mentioned previously, so high yields for stakers, That's a given. Increased liquidity for supporting the Cosmos DeFi ecosystem. As we said, we can unlock up to $5 billion at today's conservative prices of capital that's currently locked and staked. And as a byproduct, we increase security for Cosmos chains. But actually, at Quicksilver, we want to do this without compromising sovereignty. So what does this mean? What does compromising sovereignty mean? Well, in my mind, there are three facets to respecting this sovereignty. The first one is validator selection. So as a validator staking on as a delegator staking on a Cosmos chain, you can, staking natively, you can select any validator you want. Quicksilver validator selection works on the principle that the user must be equipped to make choices over validator selection, and everything else we do comes second to this principle. It is a strong belief of ours at Quicksilver that the protocol must not be opinionated around what users can and can't do. They shouldn't be opinionated around what validators should be selectable, and we should try and mirror, insofar as possible, the user's native choices on the Quicksilver chain. So this means allowing users to essentially choose any validator that they otherwise could choose natively. There is one small caveat to this, that for reasons of whether it's security or for economic reasons, Quicksilver token holders are able to essentially deny or vote to deny validators, certain validators, access to be delegated to, but the default position should be that the protocol doesn't have an opinion. The second of these concepts of respecting sovereignty is that the protocol should also not have an opinion and not dictate how this locked capital is distributed amongst the validators. So, as it stands, you kind of have three different ways that this can go. Some protocols would choose to split stake equally across the validators that they've chosen. Some protocols will choose to weight certain validators differently to others. And the way Quicksilver wants to handle it is delegators should be able to choose what portion of their capital gets delegated to which validators. So the way we do this at Quicksilver is what we call intent signaling. Intent signaling is essentially allowing a user for any given chain to say, I want to vote, or I want my proportion of the voting power, controlled by Quicksilver, to go 50% to one validator, 20% to one validator, 30% to one validator. And they're able to do this either explicitly by sending a message signal intent transaction, or alternatively, it's done implicitly at the time of delegation. You select which validators and which proportions you want to delegate to. At the end of every epoch, these intents across the network are weighted by the delegators' voting power, by the Q atoms they hold, whether that's on-chain or off-chain. And we use off-chain proofs to be able to determine what atoms or what Q assets are held off-chain. And these weighted intents are then aggregated, and we use that as the kind of the plan to dictate how we distribute future delegations or how we distribute redelegations amongst the protocol. And the third and most important facet of these respecting sovereignty argument is governance. So governance in Cosmos is the absolute backbone of the ecosystem. It's what sets Cosmos apart, I think, more than anything else from many of the other chains and ecosystems. So it does it really well, and I think the participation rates we see, especially on the chains like Juno and Osmosis, and the Cosmos Hub as well to a certain degree, shows how highly regarded governance is amongst cosmonauts. And cosmonauts genuinely do use this facility to make the most of it. Now, it's critical that any liquid staking provider doesn't negate this governance process. It's incredibly powerful in its design, and we need to be careful that no steps are taken by staking providers that essentially counteracts the strength of this, or indeed subverts it. So governance by proxy was coined by us in our white paper in February, and it's going to be one of the key features of Quicksilver. So why is it critical then that users are able to vote with their Q assets? Well, in Cosmos governance, when you choose not to vote, your validator assumes your voting power for that proposal. And that situation is fine and dandy when you're able to choose that validator. Now, the problem comes, and it's a twofold problem. But the problem comes when, firstly, you're not able to make that choice. At the moment, you can choose to either vote or you can choose not to vote. And if you choose not to vote, you know that your validator will vote on your behalf. And generally, you may have chosen that validator because of their voting record, because you know what they stand for, because you know what they believe in. If you choose not to vote, you're happy that your validator will vote on your behalf. However, if that choice is taken away from you, i.e. you cannot vote through protocol to choose to vote or not to vote, then you de facto surrender that vote to the validator that your voting power is allocated to. Now, as we said in the previous slides, you may not have choice over who that validator is or what proportion of your voting power goes to that validator. So you, by onboarding to a protocol that doesn't support proxying your governance rights to you via protocol, you essentially surrender your voting power to what may be a handful of already very disproportionately powered validators who have a lot of power in the ecosystem. And that somewhat subverts the power of governance. So that for us is why governance by proxy is such a massively important feature of Quicksilver, and one that will be on the on the mainnet very, very soon, one would hope, without giving anything away at all. And then the final point I wanted to speak to you about today is airdrops and liquid staking. It's one of the biggest questions we've been asked, or most frequent questions we're asked currently, is how does Quicksilver support airdrops on onboarded chains? So this can be broken down into two separate sections. We have standard airdrops, and standard airdrops, by which I mean the airdrop drops an airdrop of tokens into a user's account. Now, these are reasonably trivially handled by protocols, and this isn't a Quicksilver specific thing. This is liquid staking in general. But when there is no action to be taken by the user, the distribution of those tokens to the main delegate account, that can be handled by the protocol reasonably easily. The problem comes when you come to what we call gamified airdrops. And gamified airdrops is, by which I mean airdrops like Osmosis and Stargaze, and the ones that Quicksilver will undertake, whereby you have to complete some action, some task, some transaction to be able to unlock the tokens that you've been airdropped. Now, when it comes to this, each of the solutions, there is no standard solution. Osmosis had their own module, Stargaze had their own module, we have our own module. I don't believe there is a standard one. And therefore, for the protocol to support gamified airdrops, there would have to be some form of custom logic for every airdrop, or a standardized solution. One of those two would work. The simple solution to this, and the one that I believe will become the de facto standard, is that actually zones wanting to perform airdrops, zones wanting to perform an airdrop to atom holders, for example, will not only consider atom holders. They will disregard the sort of delegate accounts from liquid staking protocols, and they will distribute tokens in addition to atom holders to Q atom holders, to ST atom holders, to staked atom holders. That any of the liquid staking atom holder token holders will essentially be airdropped to in addition. I think this is the simplest and most elegant method of handling these gamified airdrops, and it's something that absolutely we will work with development teams to support their airdrops going forwards. So, in a nutshell, and I appreciate I've raced through this super fast, but we've covered today why liquid staking is important, and these are the three facets of the staker's dilemma. So, do we stake or do we DeFi? Why not both? And it's the problem of capital efficiency. So how do we unlock that 95%, that $5 billion, so that the DeFi ecosystem can have a massive deluge of liquidity? We've covered why respecting sovereignty is important, and how we go about it. So liquid staking providers have an obligation to empower users and give them options, give them choice, and not take their choice away. And specifically around validator selection and voting distribution, how Quicksilver will allow users to delegate to any validator and not just a predefined subset defined by governance, defined by core dev teams, whoever. And again, the voting power distribution with signaling intent, how, again, the user is given the absolute choice to determine where their voting power goes rather than have that option taken away from them. We've covered why liquid staking must facilitate true representation in governance. That is, the user should have, again, the absolute same options, rights, and power that they have natively. And we've discussed how liquid staking protocols might approach handling airdrops. So that is it for my presentation. Thank you very much for having me, and enjoy Cosmoverse. Enjoy Medellin.